What is up, everybody? Joe Morrison, 49SAF Pod. And to kick us off for November, we're taking it to the house. I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. Peter House, CEO of Deeptree, is our guest on this episode. And Deeptree isn't a startup company anymore. I remember when Pete started it 4 or 5 years ago. But Pete's company makes the world a safer place to compute. So some of it's cybersecurity, some of it's data security, some of it is risk mitigation. Pete's company works on all kinds of things like that. And although we do talk a little bit about cybersecurity and the aspects of that keep Peter up at night, really this episode is about sort of what it takes to be an entrepreneur, what it's like 4 or 5 years in, some of the psychological and work-life balance things that you need to address as you keep going. So we talk a lot and fairly deeply about those things. And I think this is just a fantastic one-on-one, pretty deep interview. And that's cool. You know, without further ado, let's hear from Pete House and the remarkable story of what it took for him to build his first company and how he even got started.
The way that I started it, because I didn't really have much money, is I went and I worked 3 jobs and I built up a little war chest, right? And then I quit my job. I had secured an anchor client.
Did you quit all 3 jobs?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But in progression.
All right. And your anchor client was who?
It was a GCSIT.
Oh, okay.
So they do data center build outs.
Oh, those are those guys in Seattle, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so they do that, and they do data center, networking, storage. They're big in the storage space. So I'm doing work for GCSIT. We're doing stuff up and down the West Coast, the Northwest area. So they're my first client and really my only client. And then I start going out and I start searching for more clients, right? Because I'm like, I gotta, it's like being in the oil industry, right? You come and go, right? And so, and this is where I had a sort of a bit of a pivot moment again. And I'm like, nobody really is interested in enterprise architecture, right? Because. And this is really, let me switch to a friend of mine real quick. He worked at Intel and he built testing harnesses. And he's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go create a startup and I'm going to sell testing harnesses. I'm going to build one. I'm going to knock on doors. I'm going to pound the pavement. I'm going to build testing harnesses. And guess what? Does it. Kills it. Beautiful product. Here's the problem. Everybody that knew what a testing harness was had one already.
Wow.
And if you didn't know what it was, you didn't need one.
And you kind of don't need a better one either, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Right. And the same principles applied with enterprise architecture as a sort of discipline. If you knew what one was, if you're like the Alaska USAs of the world, you already had one in-house. You didn't need to outsource it, right? And you're going to get better, more intimate knowledge of the business by having it insourced anyways, right? And so I'm struggling with this problem where I'm not getting traction, right? And so I go down and I hang out with a bunch of my startup buddies, and he's in the process of selling his company to Amazon. So he actually pivoted it and made a sizable dent into the marketplace and was able to sell it. And he just kind of puts his arm around me and says, hey, man, so here's what you're going to do. You're going to go take all the work you could possibly get. And and what you'll do...
Regardless of what kind of work it is, right? Yeah, you're going to go get revenue.
You're going to go get revenue. Yeah. And, hey, remember, Sony made beam paste and pot holders.
Okay. Yeah, right? Sure.
They, in the very early days.
Nintendo was trading cards, right? Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, Nintendo was trading cards. Yeah.
Well, I learned something new. Awesome. So
To be verified by Wikipedia by everyone listening to this podcast.
Are you talking about? Go grab my phone.
Pretty sure. Anyway.
He's like, and he said, what you'll do is you'll find a pattern in the marketplace. You'll see something that's not being solved, and that's what you're going to go after. Okay, so flash forward, and that's basically more or less what we saw. What I saw and what Caesar and the rest of the company saw was we looked at what's happening in the marketplace. You've got a lot of generalists, managed service providers, and we saw that there wasn't a lot of coverage around the risk management space. There was none, exactly. Nobody was really putting their neck out there to say, we're going to actively defend our customers from all kinds of mishaps. There's network security, right? That's helpful. There's a lot of great, cyber security firms out there. But what happens when somebody accidentally, this has happened to me in a past life, deletes all the contents of their database? And you don't have a database administrator on hand.
So your first 2 years at Deeptree, and how would you describe them? Like in a sentence, in a word, actually.
I'm going to use 3: hustle and thrash.
Could you, I think we all get hustle. Could you explain thrash?
Right. So thrash is where you get all kinds of different customers, all different flavors, and you're doing as good of a job as possible for them. And you're understanding that, that's not what I'm going to make a living doing.
What kind of revenue growth have you seen over 4 years? I'd say we're about 25 to 30% year over year. Okay, that's good.
Well, it's almost like losing weight a little bit. Like,
don't worry, I'm not going to do that.
It's always easy to get those big percentages
early on, because there's not much to go off of.
There's not much to go off of, yeah.
Right. So you've had this 4-year journey where you knew you wanted to start the company, right? It wasn't like a surprise. It wasn't like, I'll just give this a try and see how it goes.
No, it was
totally intentional.
Totally intentional, yeah.
Right. You worked 3 jobs for how many years? 1, 2?
So I worked 2 jobs for a number of years, and then right before the split, I picked up a 3rd just to build up a little extra.
So let me ask a pretty challenging question. What's it like for your wife and 2 daughters when you're grinding this hard?
Mm-hmm. It's a real challenge. So, one of the things is when you're a founder, you talk to any founder, there's months you go without pulling a paycheck, right? You gotta be smart about your money. And, I've got a number of friends who they're like, oh yeah, I went without a paycheck for a few months. One guy I know went without a paycheck for a year. So, you got children that are getting a little bit older and they're able to see the sort of nicer material goods that their friends are having. And, you're still wearing the same stuff you're wearing as long as it still fits. It's a bit of a challenge. And then there's also the side of it of dad's gone on the weekends. And sometimes dad's not even, mentally present, right? Because, maybe there's a thing that's coming up or there's something that's, little, is drawing my attention. So, on both sides of it, the family does, I suffer. But, the way that I see it is to step into it, right? I mean, it's almost like NASCAR a little bit, right? So what's the principle? When you lose control, right? Turn into it, right? So you're supposed to turn into it. Your car.
You instinctively turn into a slide in your car. I agree. Exactly. I'm still trying to think of the ballad of Ricky Bobby in NASCAR. But okay, so
turn into it, embrace it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, what are the strategies and tactics you've put in place to be present and to balance your ambition with your family?
All right. So, just
I told you we might go some interesting places.
You're swinging. Yeah. I love it. So the first one is find ways for the children to participate. So one of the things I did a few months in was I just started grabbing stuff. I went down to Target, grabbed a bunch of Legos, some blocks, and just allowed the kids to be in the same office as me while I worked. Right? That was helpful. The other thing that happened was I shifted my sleep schedule. So I'd go to bed when the kids did, and I'd wake up at 4 in the morning. That was helpful. That also gave me some time to exercise and, spend a little bit of time on professional development. And the other thing was that I just learned to cut everything that wasn't necessary out. So there's no television, there's no video games. There's no Candy Crush. You got to limit down to what you can actually, if you can get it down to 5 things, one for each finger, I think you're doing all right.
When you say 5 things, do you mean like 5 ambitions? I want to close this deal. I want to have this kind of target in my company. I want to go out with my wife on Friday nights. I want to play cards with the guys. Like, is that what you mean? 5 things like that?
Yeah, exactly like that. So I'm going to hit my revenue goal for the month or for the year, or I'm going to pull this off. For me, it was going on on a big publicity tear for the company, because I truly believe that people should hear what we do. They should be able to make an informed decision, right? Being Alaska's best kept secret doesn't help anybody, because we're actually in business to help people. But I'm going to spend time with my wife. So, Fridays are date night. That's sacrosanct, right? Saturdays, we go out. Saturday mornings, we go out as a family. Carve the time out. Make it happen.
How much sleep do you get a night?
Somewhere between 5.5 and 7. It just depends on what's happening. I think I got 6 last night. It's not bad.
You sort of have to be on all the time, right? Some people do. Is that you?
I think yes and no. So, for me, like I strongly identify with like Bill Belichick, right? You win the Super Bowl, and you're back at work the next day, planning on how you're going to get the next one, right? That is something that I strongly identify with. Recognizing that sleep, the regenerative powers of sleep, the fact that beta brain waves, which is really where a lot of your creative processing comes from, is crucial. It's easy for business entrepreneurs of any type, or business people really, to get into a very short time horizon and to think tactically, day in and day out, week in and week out. That doesn't serve a founder well. Doesn't serve any entrepreneur well. This bimodal, there needs to be a bimodal existence of spending time working on strategy, tending to one's own garden. I forced myself to read Michael Porter's Competitive Strategy. And then, because it's a super complicated book, a reader to go along with it to help me sort through what was in there, because I needed to understand market forces. That's not something that's going to immediately generate revenue, but it will position the company if that leads to, and it actually did. It actually was one of the things that helped lead to the Castle Mountain and the Ironwood programs that we have. That's got to be integral just as much as making sure that you've got a good profit and loss, your cash flow is good, you've got the right people on the bus, and you're executing in the right way. That's stuff that you think about on a sort of more regular basis. So yes, I think that being manic in bursts, absolutely. Like take a fisherman, absolutely. You can't do that year in and year out, but you can definitely do it for a summer. That's the way that I would approach it. That's the way that I do approach it. Is that clear as mud or what?
No, it's clear. It's clear. And it's always good listening to you. No one else is going to say beta brainwaves on this podcast. So I'm thrilled we're doing this. If there's one thing you want to change about Deeptree that you may not be able to, what is it?
Well, Barbara Walters.
And I asked the question because, of course, I'm sure you have a variety of goals. Like I've walked into your office, I've seen a bunch of things written on the wall as to where you want to go, and you bring in your team, right? And you guys ideate together. And of course, there are things you want to change, and there are things that are within your power to change at your company. What's something you worry you might not be able to change?
Yeah, I think well, maybe I'm a little megalomaniacal here in the sense that there's very little that I don't think could be changed within the company outside of myself. And, every person has strengths and weaknesses. And you start to get up in the years and you start to become aware of your own, right? Like, geez.
Ideally, you become aware of your own.
Yeah. Sort of aware of a few of mine. Having a wife helps with that. So the ability to actually have organizations where everybody actually cares about security, and this is actually something that we look at the overall culture. Right? Let's take the last 100 years, right? So what are we driven on? We're driven on productivity, right? Return on net asset, right? We want to lower the transaction cost to bring cost of goods sold as low as possible, right? Everything is about efficiency. Yeah,
I would say that certainly there's been a cost cutting kind of approach, maybe up until this startup boom type thing that's happening, right? So the startup boom is very focused on new value creation, growth, revenue growth.
Yes.
But, 80s, 90s, 00s, before we really sort of embraced this cost cutting and, squeezing every inch out of your margin. And that's still probably the norm because we're in the startup industry. You're a startup and I try to help startups. That's what we think about is growth, but probably mature businesses just think about getting that margin as big as you can by pushing down everything else.
And think if you're a line worker and your job is to be productive and you got somebody that's coming in that's telling you, we see this in the healthcare industry, like, data access. That's a whole different conversation about who's got access to what data, whatever. Anything that looks like it's going to drive up the amount of time to get a task done is met with resistance. Even if it has strategically a great outcome for the company. This is just, the resistance doesn't mean that the resistance is the final answer. It just means that what you're doing is you're swimming upstream. You're going to have to put a lot of effort in to change people's hearts and minds to actually bring about the change that you want to bring. That's organizational change management. That's OCM. And that's a deeper, richer conversation, right? That's Cotter, right? That's a lot harder than looking at, well, do you know do you know that you're not supposed to, open an email from people you don't know? It's a little bit different.
And how many people are at Deeptree now?
We have 5 full-time employees.
Okay.
Small company.
Why'd you call it Deeptree?
I have no good answer for that.
Okay. Well, you've got a leaf and it has little cybernetic points on it. So that's kind of cool.
The reasoning filled in after the fact. I thought the name was pretty cool. And I tried to come up with other names. I was like, okay, so when I sat down, like, I'm going to name my company.
And did you get the .com?
No.
Okay.
I got the hyphen.
Okay. All right.
That's a long story, kind of boring.
No, I just wanted to see if you had the .com. It's cool.
No.
Yeah.
But I sat down, I wrote the name, and I was like, that's a pretty cool name. And I sat there for 15 minutes. I couldn't think of anything else. And then I started thinking about all the ways that Deeptree is kind of cool. There's a computer science component to it, right? So,
probably.
I won't bore you with that one. But then also the imagery, the mental imagery of vitality, strength, deep roots, growth. Those are all things that resonate.
So, what do you want out of next year?
I'm looking to. I can't tell you. I mean, next year I want to have.
Is that because you don't know, or because you just don't want to speak it?
Yes. So you know what?
I love it.
So part of it is that I've got revenue goals that are roughly 3 to 4 times again, when you're early, these are the numbers you should be looking at, 3 to 4 times what we expect to make this year. That's true, but I'm coming into the season where it's time to update our business plan. And I haven't done that yet because it's October. Try to do that during the holidays when it's a little bit quieter. And so to be more specific than just a revenue target is, would just be dishonest.
Yeah, but what about personally?
Personally? Oh, that's easy. So I want to be, I have many goals there. So the things that I'm working on is fluency in French. I'm working on.
For the love of
I'm the worst. You have no idea. It's all downhill from there. That was the easy one.
So keep going.
I want to I'm working on becoming LEED certified, and I want to get out climbing on rock successfully. I'm doing indoor climbing right now, and I'm doing 511s. And, so I'd like to be out on rock next year on a consistent basis and exploring the backcountry of Alaska. And I've got some goals mathematically around topology and matrix theory that I work on as well too.
All right, we're going to close this out with one exercise that is probably a bunch of rubbish, but
I love rubbish.
Yeah, it's rubbish, but I'm just interested to see how you answer this question. There's no right or wrong answer. I love you either way. Okay. Identify your dominant hand. Okay. Snap your fingers 5 times in rapid succession. Draw an E on your forehead. Draw that E again. Okay. All right. Good to know. So can you guess what that's about?
No.
Okay. So the concept is
it how much of a sucker Pete is? And what can I get him to do?
No. So, and I should do some more reading on this particular subject. People who are feeling empowered or people who are in power are more likely to draw a reverse E on their forehead.
What did I do?
You drew a reverse E on your forehead. Okay. People who are in lower positions of power or who are, now don't get upset, who are exhibiting more empathy, draw an E backwards, right? So I'm just guessing. Can you see that E? Or how did I draw it?
You did the,
So you can see my E.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just a psychological study that I thought it was neat. And I wanted to see how you answered it.
So drawing it backwards.
Most people draw it backwards. I've done this 4 or 5 times in the last week.
So that's
most people draw it backwards so that the person sitting across from them sees it backwards.
You saw it.
I saw it backwards.
You saw it backwards? That's backwards?
That's backwards. Yeah.
All right. So what is it? So what is that supposed to infer about me?
It infers how you're relating to others in the world, your position of power, and your level of empathy. Now, of course, it doesn't mean all of those things.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Does this mean that I'm an empathetic person?
This means that you're coming from a position of power and you're more likely to see things the way you see them, and other people need to come around to your point of view. And that's probably not true either. I haven't read the study.
No, well, here's the thing. It's like plural of anecdote is not evidence. But this has been a lifelong challenge for me.
Well, I think it's a lifelong challenge for most of us.
That's totally fair.
Yeah,
totally fair.
It's a lifelong challenge for most of us. Look, the best boss I ever had, I love all my bosses, including my current boss, but the best boss I ever had, who's a remarkably empathetic person, is a C-suite executive. He drew it backwards. My aunt and uncle, who are givers and they give to the family all the time, they drew it backwards. I'm sure that because I read it, I draw it forwards, and of course, when we say backwards, we mean backwards from the point of view of somebody sitting up opposite from you.
Yeah,
right? It's all relative. I mean, I think it's whatever, to some extent, I think it's what everybody's working on. And as you pointed out earlier, we all have our flossomeness. And that when you hit 40, okay, well, and maybe I'm being biased and now I'm kind of diving into our particular worldview, but you're you're kind of right. If you don't have a clue as to some of your weaknesses, you're probably missing a few things, right? Yeah. I'm not saying this is one of them. I just wanted to see how you answered a silly question and wanted you to snap your fingers.
I love games like this. This is awesome. And you're like, okay, so how well can Pete follow instructions? I love it.
I think you can follow instructions pretty well. Hey, man, thanks for being on the cast.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And from Amber Bay Loop, this is Joe Morrison, 49 SAF Pod, signing out. And on his way home, Peter House is going to listen to the Beach Boys. One of my favorite things about you, Pete, is that, you're like 10 times smarter than me/anybody I know.
Whatever.
But and a good story about Pete is that he has like 2 bookshelves in his office, and one of them is like the brainy bookshelf, and it has a bunch of math and a bunch of like philosophy and other sorts of, what's one book in your brainy bookshelf?
Well, Secrets and Lies. That's a good one.
By who?
Bruce Schneier.
About what?
Network security.
Right. Okay. So that's one bookshelf. That's one entire vertical bookshelf. And then the other bookshelf, is sort of your fun bookshelf. Name one thing on that bookshelf.
Red shirts. That's fun.
Is that about Star Trekkies who get shot?
Yeah.